people to adopt hook, line, and sinker, the theory of evolution, are not the arguments for evolution themselves. It is the fact that the theory of evolution is held dogmatically and in wide consensus. This is the number one intimidating factor.
For me, it's the fact that we can see it in different species, how they need to evolve to survive in their environment.
No, sir, stop. Okay, stop with that claptrap. When you said we see, okay, you don't see it. That is an extrapolated conjecture that you're pretending is in the sense datum.
Well, one of the kind of
Hold on 1 second. I have to switch. Hold on.
Sure.
I'll be with you in a second.
I think one of the bait and switches that I hear atheists talk about is they'll talk about speciation. Okay, we're talking microevolution, which is incremental mutations and stuff that you see from like insertions and point mutations and things like that, which does happen. You see that with dog breeding, people breeding different types of animals or dogs. You get all these where you have a Canis lupus or something. You'll have like an original wolf, which contains all the genetic, which contains most of the genetic information, and then you end up
and potential for variation.
Exactly, and through degradative mutations in selection. I mean, this goes to like Mendel, of dominant and recessive traits, right?
But here's the thing: is this isn't true of all animal species. It just happens that certain things, especially given human selection, can be very plastic in terms of size, musculature, color, hair length, things like that. But this is not producing all new complex anatomy and physiology. Okay, yeah, sir, what did the other person want to say?
Yeah, let's hear the guy
Jib?
who was saying.
Yeah, I'm here. I was saying, how do you?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, cool. I was saying essentially how animals adapt into their environment. Like camels are a good example. How they need to adapt for the environment, so they have all the water in their homes.
What does it? Okay, that's begging the question right there. You're already packing into it evolutionary assumptions. You see the brainwashing here. You see, when you're taught evolution in school, they pre-package into it a number of a priori assumptions which guarantee evolution is true to begin with. Okay. Listen. Let me ask you this question.
Go on.
Do you think natural selection is the mechanism that produced biological evolution?
Sounds about right.
No, that's because they didn't properly teach you correctly. Natural selection is only preservative, not creative.
I'd rather just talk about the animals, though. Like we have.
Did you hear? Okay, well, sir, listen to me.
Hyenas or something.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Look like leopards.
Hold on a second.
Go on.
Hold on a second. I don't want to discourage you from speaking your mind, but I think you should just listen just a wee bit more, okay? People are programmed natural selection as though that's evolution. Do you know that creationists and intelligent design advocates all accept natural selection, but they don't accept evolution? Natural selection is not the same thing as Darwinian evolution. Okay? But natural selection is used as a kind of shorthand for Darwinian or the neo-Darwinian synthesis. Natural selection just simply means is that the offspring and reproduction that is more fit in an environment will live on to reproduce another day. That is only preservative. That is not creative, sir. So in order for evolution to come true, you have to have an ever-increasing pool of extremely long, linear, complex, hierarchical genetic information, producing an ever-increased body plans of the animal kingdom. So what is the source or the creative mechanism that produces this ever-increasing pool of genetic information? What's the source of it? You just take it for granted that beneficial mutations will happen and accumulate, and once they accumulate enough and they're fortuitous, boom, they're preserved and they reproduce. What's the observational support for that?
I believe I was mentioning, I might have the animal mixed up. I believe it's hyena pups. When they're born, they look similar to like leopards or like another animal within that species. So they're not
Sir,
hunted as
you're
often.
not
as
even
often.
focusing on what I'm saying to you. What I'm trying to say to you, you've been brainwashed by evolutionary propaganda, right? Not that those people were trying to deceive you. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. And because of your lack of research in the area, you cannot differentiate between what is fact and what is evolutionary conjecture and extrapolation that's presented to you as a fact. Okay? Now, do you think that the fossil record is a powerful testimony of gradualism?
Yeah.
No, it's not. You see how you've been fooled? Let me read something to you, okay? This is from Dr. Eugene Koonin. And the atheists who listen to me, they're losing their minds. And I don't mean right now, but in the recent past, they lose their minds when I read. Okay? Let me just read the quote. This is from a book defending biological evolution by Dr. Eugene Koonin, who is a world-renowned microbiologist and world-renowned expert on evolutionary biology. Okay? Now, you just told me that the fossil record is an exemplar of gradualism, right? This is what you believe that you have been taught, right? The general lack of transitional forms between species in the fossil record is a constant theme in evolutionary biology. Darwin recognized this problem and traditionally interpreted it, along with paleontologists in the Darwinian tradition, as a reflection of the dramatic incompleteness of the record. However, extensive accumulation of paleontological data in the 20th century helped very little, if at all. So a different perspective emerged. Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge collected extensive evidence indicating that the history of the great majority of animal species, as reflected in the fossil record, represents mostly stasis. That is a virtual lack of change. Stasis is punctuated by sudden disappearance of species, followed by a rapid replacement of new species. The implication of this pervasive pattern. Okay, what's the pervasive pattern? In other words, creatures appear abruptly, they disappear abruptly in the fossilized remains. The implication of this pervasive pattern is that speciation is a rapid process compared to the duration of stasis. So Dr. Eugene Koonin here is pointing out what is well known by paleontologists is that the fossil record, which is supposedly representative of the tree of life, that all we have are exemplars of the tips and nodes of the tree of life, but we don't have all these intermediate forms at all. But they'll just point to some of the tips and nodes. They'll go, oh, Archaeopteryx, oh, Tiktaalik, and they'll say, well, these are transitional forms. Look, this is ludicrous. Stephen Jay Gould. Listen,
from my understanding,
do you know who Stephen Jay Gould? Do you know who Stephen Jay Gould was?
From my understanding, he created a new branch of evolution because he said the original branch was
no, sir. No. Stephen Jay Gould, okay, didn't create a new branch. He just came up with a new sub-theory for evolution. He didn't replace evolution. He just said that it doesn't happen gradualistically. Okay, so he believes in a non-gradualistic evolution. Okay, now the point I'm trying to make to you is that you believe evolution happened, and you believe that you were given a fairly decent instruction in evolution, but you were convinced that the fossil record supported gradualism when some of the greatest paleontological minds, such as Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge and others, and other paleontologists all recognize the fact that the fossil record is not an exemplar of gradualism, but you thought it was. Now, how'd that happen?
There's still evolutionary scientists and stuff.
Focus on what I'm saying to you.
I mean, I would rather talk than quote
you're
mining.
You're with me like you're a 12-year-old. I'm talking to you like Okay. And what's the basis for me? How am I quote mining?
Because you're quoting an atheist for no reason when we should be just discussing about the
Okay,
animals
sir.
themselves.
Okay, stop right there.
Like I was talking about.
I am done with you right now. I want you to be quiet or I'm going to server mute you. I am done with you now because what you just did is I gave you a definitive quote by a staunch evolutionist, a staunch expert in evolutionary biology who recognized a truth that is well known within paleontology, and you have the balls to say I'm quote mining is because you don't like the input. Okay, goodbye. Okay, you see, this is what they do. Okay, you show them a direct statement by experts in the field who are evolutionists themselves, who contradict their popular notions that the fossil record displays gradualism, because he doesn't want his ill-informed belief to be falsified. He resorts to saying, well, you're quote mining. On what basis does he say I'm quote mining? You see what the human mind will do? Okay. I just gave him one of their own, a top expert on evolution, a staunch evolutionist pointing out that there is extensive evidence to show that gradualism is not demonstrated in the least in the fossil record. That's why Gould and Eldridge, who collected extensive evidence to show this, came up with punctuated equilibrium, okay? Here's a real simple question, dum-dum. If gradualism is in the fossil record, then why would Stephen Jay Gould be compelled to promote punctuated equilibrium? Answer that question.
Not sure, but I'd rather just talk about the animals and why they look like other animals.
Okay, how old are you?
Predators.
How old are you?
You've asked me this 3 times.
How old are you?
This is the 3rd time you've asked me. And
Goodbye. Good. Now I'm kicking you out of the room. Okay. You see, you get these little teenage males who think they know more than somebody who studied it more than they have, and then they accuse you of quote mining when they have nothing to support it. Okay.
Well, Stephen Gould in the the evolutionary biologists at the time, they realized there wasn't enough time to search the space in terms of all the probability issues they were talking about before. When they talk about the Cambrian explosion and the Precambrian explosion, there just simply wasn't enough time looking at the fossil record based on exactly what you're talking about. 500 from like 550 to 500 million years ago, you've got all of this new complex life from trilobites to brachiopods that have compound
It doesn't
eyes.
matter. None of this matters. Don't you understand? For people who've drunk the Kool-Aid, even if we bring significant scientific kind of reasoning and defeaters, it doesn't matter. Look, evolution is true as far as they're concerned. Therefore, whatever defeaters that we bring have to be false. Do you understand? This is what we're dealing with. Okay, so when I read to him a top expert on evolution, who's simply pointing out, look, the fossil record does not display gradualism. The creatures appear abruptly and they disappear abruptly without numerous transitional forms. And he's simply recapitulating what top paleontologists have said in their own field. This guy says I'm quote mining when I'm not quote mining in the least. It's not out of context. It's not.
He's out of touch. They realized that even in the 70s. This was in the 1970s and 80s. They already knew, like, no, there isn't enough time.
Watch this.
200 million years. So.
Do you understand that it's a serious charge to say somebody's quote mining? Now, do you have a copy of this book?
No, I don't.
Then how do you know that I'm quote mining?
Because you're literally quoting them when we could just be talking about the species
themselves. You're an idiot. What are you, 14?
So all quotes are quote mining.
Yeah, you just heard it there. You just heard it there for himself. You're quote mining because
statement that is in some way self-referential, either by its internal content or the background information needed to make the statement of the proposition, wherein the background information either undermines or contradicts the ability to rationally invoke the proposition. So under that proviso of a performative contradiction, atheism is a performative contradiction. But atheists don't care because they're not rational. Okay, that's all
Okay.
they got. They don't make cogent arguments.
Yeah, I
Even-
understand what a
even-
performative contradiction is.
You got to take over. I'm going to be AFK.
Okay.
So basically, if atheism was true, yeah, there'd be no connections. The patterns would be an illusion, and that would make knowledge impossible. So it's like it's
What?
self-defeating. If atheism were true, knowledge would be impossible because there'd be no real connections between things.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. But isn't your way of thinking and saying atheism is rational only work because God is real? That this is like the only way that works, but isn't that in itself self-referential?
Well, no, because we can do like a thought experiment where I could assume like the atheist worldview, and I could show that how that would like entail a contradiction, whereas like the Christian worldview would be coherent. It wouldn't entail. It wouldn't destroy knowledge at a foundational level. It doesn't make knowledge impossible. It makes knowledge possible. The Christian worldview provides the preconditions for knowledge. And
So, okay.
it's unique in doing that. No other worldview does that.
So your point of view is that atheism doesn't work because without God, knowledge doesn't have any patterns?
Knowledge is impossible. So if knowledge, then the Christian God, we know things.
Why is knowledge impossible?
Because for knowledge to be possible, you need an ultimate that where like unity, connections and distinctions are co-equal ultimately. And that's what uniquely the Christian worldview has.
No,
The doctrine of the Trinity.
I-
No other worldview has a ultimate, identifiable, defendable ultimate with a co-equal.
But why would the worldview need an ultimate answer?
Because if ultimately everything is unity, then knowledge is impossible because distinctions aren't real. And if ultimately everything is distinct, then knowledge is impossible because connections aren't real. So either way you go, knowledge is impossible. You have to have an ultimate where distinctions and connections are co-equal. And that's what we have in the Trinity, where we have three distinct persons united in one Godhead. So we have unity and distinctions in co-equal. That's the only way knowledge is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to be a Christian or do you want to be irrational?
I tend to try to live my life as rationally as possible.
Well, then you
But-
should be a Christian.
But I have so many problems with Christianity, I don't want to even start to think about being a Christian.
Well, you're going to have more problems with any non-Christian position because you won't be able to explain your experience. So your beliefs.
Why can't I explain my experience without Christianity?
Because I just explained to you how Christianity is necessary for knowledge to be possible. You make
Okay.
knowledge claims, therefore, whether you admit it or not, you're a Christian. So you just want to be like,
Okay, so the problem that you raise with Christianity, is your evaluation relativistic, or does it have some objective grounding?
Well, why? If I try to argue anything objective, how can I claim objective?
Sir, you're not addressing what I ask you. If you say XYZ is wrong within the confines of the propositions of Christianity, is that a relativistic determination, meaning it's purely subjective and doesn't have an objective grounding or referent?
Of course, there's no objective grounding. There's no
Okay, good. Then all you're just simply saying is that you have a subjective mental state.
But
That doesn't.
objective truth doesn't exist. It's impossible. Even
Okay. Stop right there.
Even
Stop.
believing in
Stop.
God is not.
Stop. My head's going to explode. Whenever
Okay.
I meet somebody who's so stupid who doesn't even understand that they've just committed an absolute self-contradiction. Okay, how old are you?
20.
Okay, I'm 63. I'm more than 3 times your age. I know a little bit more about life than you do. You just uttered a absolute crystal clear performative contradiction. Is the
Okay.
statement there is no objective truth objectively true?
Of course not.
Good. Then you're not saying anything that's true.
It's subjectively true because objectivity is impossible.
No, sir. You're not understanding. If it's subjectively true, then it's relativistic.
No, it's circular reasoning.
Look, dude, you don't know.
Yeah.
You're 20 years old. You're uneducated on metaphysics, philosophy, and logic. You don't know what you're talking about. If you say it's subjectively true, all you're just simply saying is, I have a mental state. That's all you're saying. Okay?
Okay, you're saying I am in a loop of.
I'm trying to explain to you, you're not educated. You're not educated in logic and philosophy and metaphysics. To say that it is subjectively true because there are no objective truths is just simply to invoke a mental state that you have. Your mental state is not communicating that it's congruent or correlative to anything in the external physical world. It's just an invocation of your mental state.
It's a contradiction because you. You're making a claim about objective truth, but the sentence isn't referring to anything in an objective reality. It's just referring to your mental state.
See, when you don't study, listen, when you don't study a modicum of logic, philosophy, and metaphysics, you run into elementary mistakes, which you have just committed. So to assert there is no objective truth will either be self-contradictory or it's meaningless. Okay?
Okay, can I say something?
Any philosophy professor will tell you. Do you understand the mistake that you made?
I understand. I did circular reasoning.
No, I didn't say no. I didn't.
Not circular reasoning.
Hey, dude, why don't you shut up for a second? I didn't accuse you of circular reasoning. I said it's a self-referential statement that contradicts itself.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I used the term. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the point is this. So how would you know that there's no objective truths when you say there's no objective truths? You couldn't know it. It's a self-contradictory position.
Because in order for objective truth to
Do you
exist,
understand that it is a self-contradictory proposition?
I understand your idea of why.
Goodbye. You're done.
But
you see, whenever I ask them if they understand and accept is true, they go, I understand that's what you believe.
Good evening.
Good evening. Are you an atheist?
Nope.
Good. Why?
I personally believe that what your beliefs are is what you'll go to.
You're not making yourself clear.
Okay. If you believe in nothing, you'll go to nothing. And that's good. That's fine. That's perfectly all right. I've got no objections against that.
You are so dumb.
Why?
All right, I'm going to go
Because I don't agree with you. I thought the purpose of this was to debate.
If you believe in nothing, you can't debate.
Why?
Debate is a reason-giving game where we give reasons for our beliefs.
Oh, I didn't say I couldn't give reasons for stuff.
You said you believe in nothing.
No, I said if you believe in nothing, then That's your eventuality, isn't it? That you will go to nothing.
No, that's just goofy.
What do you mean that's goofy?
I mean, you're just saying something that's like based on nothing. There's no evidence.
Okay, so if you believe in nothing, what do you think happens when you die?
You go to hell.
But you believe in nothing, so why would you believe in hell? Like,
It doesn't matter.
That's irrational. That doesn't make any sense.
If you believe gravity isn't real, can you jump to the moon?
Hang on, no, your point there was completely. That was.
Bye-bye. Welcome, Matt.
Did you kick him?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you to ask Darth next time he's up because he'll never actually answer this. Oh, geez, my Bluetooth just connected. Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Bye-bye. Kick anyone who is reasonable. What would you like to say, David?
Oh, yeah. I think it's ironic that his name is Darth Dawkins, and he also pushed away his wife and children, like Darth Vader.
Oh.
You're kind of slow on the block.
Slow on the block. I ain't like Shaq on the block.
You're going to hell.
Who hurt you?
My honest answer, you're just going to, like, I don't know, kick me or something. Because my honest answer
I don't
is
want a bullshit
actualizes
answer.
reality.
I want an intelligent answer, not just empty rhetoric pretending that you're giving me a good answer. What actualizes that each and every identity state equals themselves in a time index?
Logic itself. It's the structure of reality.
It doesn't stand in. Okay, see, this is how uneducated you are. The laws of logic, are they material or immaterial? Or abstract?
Material.
I didn't hear you.
Immaterial, I guess.
Okay. Do immaterial states stand in causal relations to material states?
I think in this case, yes, they can.
Okay. You think, on what is your rational basis to say that an abstract laws, okay, stand in causal relations?
Because logic defines the structure of what can and cannot be.
Dude, you know what? I really don't want to kick you. You're just simply grasping at straws at this point and bullshitting, trying to pretend. Look, do I sound like I'm a little bit more educated on the subject matter than you?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I am. Okay. Now, do non-material states stand in causal relations to material states? Well, you said yes. Well, and what's your rationale for that?
So logic is about the relationship between things. And those relationships
keep on
are
doing
structured.
this. You're 30 years old going on 16. I want a substantive answer. Don't give me an answer that would fool a fifth grader. I'm 63. I'm slightly less than double your age. I wasn't born yesterday. Do you know that all identity states are caused, the self-identity of every identity state is caused by immaterial things? Do you know that by induction or observation?
I would say deduction.
Okay, deduction would involve a first premise, a second premise, and then a conclusion. What's your first and second premise and the conclusion?
All right, give me a moment. I've never had to
what the
formulate a
hell you're
syllogism
talking
for it.
about. You throw out empty rhetoric. What's your
It's not
argument? What is your deductive argument that immaterial states cause material states?
All right.
And if you lie, I'm going to kick you and block your account.
Okay.
What is your argument that immaterial states stand in causal relations to material states?
Okay. So the material universe had to have a cause, and that cause had to be before material things existed. Therefore, immaterial things.
Dude, this is embarrassing. You're 30 years old and you're royally embarrassing yourself on. How do you know anything had to have a beginning?
How do I know anything had to have a beginning? So that I can say inductively and logically, because there's an infinite regress of a causal chain shouldn't be possible.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Just logically, because if you have an infinite number of steps to get to now, you wouldn't be able to get to now.
Notice the pattern of your. Do you notice the pattern of your responses? That you don't respond with specificity, you just respond with generalities. Do you realize that's what you do?
I think I'm being broad, but I am being specific.
I'm not a fifth grader. I'm almost double your age. You're not fooling me with your empty rhetoric. You're not saying anything of substance. Have you observed? Okay, so you're not claiming that you know that all identity states are actualized by immaterial states, right? So do you know this by pure a priori reason?
I explained my reasoning. The scientific evidence points to time having a beginning.
You can't possibly know this inductively. So are you using a priori reasoning to establish this? See, you're a fool. Get out of here. You know what, dude? You talk to me like you think I'm a fifth grader. I'm more educated on metaphysics and logic than you are. You're just bullshitting. Goodbye. This is what I can't stand. People who will just outright lie about stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy, man.
I mean, for instance, to go, oh, immaterial states cause stand in causal relations to material states. Really? How do you know that?
First, and then you start the so you turn on the